Chapter 1. The Invisible Maid. Have you ever wondered what it feels like to be invisible? Even in a palace full of eyes? The palace of the Black Fang Dominion rose like a silver fortress beneath the moonlight, mist curling around its spires, soft and ethereal. Yet inside, the grandeur felt cold, distant, and unwelcoming to Celine Vera. She moved like a shadow, quiet and unremarkable, carrying buckets and brooms as though she were part of the palace's furniture rather than its living heart. Celine had learned early that to survive here, she must be invisible. She scrubbed bloodstains from marble floors, remnants of duels and accidents that no one dared to speak of aloud. She heard secrets meant for ears far above her station. Whispered betrayals, hushed warnings, plots that could topple men far stronger than herself. And every day, the warriors of the palace mocked her, calling her ghost, mud-stained nothing, or the girl who sweeps while life passes her by. But Celine had a gift she did not yet understand. Patience, quiet observation, and a resilience that ran deeper than the palace walls themselves. Tonight, like so many nights, she worked silently in the corridors, her braids swinging lightly against her back, her fingers aching from scrubbing, her heart quietly wishing she could be seen for who she truly was. Then, it happened. A scent, sharp and intoxicating, filled the air around her. A heat that was not hers, yet somehow drew closer. Celine froze mid-sweep, broom in hand, heart skipping a beat. Somewhere ahead, Aldrich Thornvale, Alpha King of the Black Fang Dominion, paused in the shadows. His dark eyes, more wolf than man in their intensity, scanned the corridor, yet he did not move forward. He only inhaled. Celine did not understand why, but she felt it too. Something ancient and primal stirred inside her chest, as if her heartbeat had suddenly matched the rhythm of the palace itself. The air between them was thick with tension, a silent pull neither dared acknowledge. "Who's there?" one of the warriors barked, breaking the moment, yet Aldrich did not answer. His gaze lingered. And then he was gone, leaving only the faint echo of his presence. Shivering, Celine bent down to inspect a stubborn stain on the marble. But when she straightened, she noticed something impossible. A faint, silver glow shimmered beneath her skin, etched across her arm like a delicate rune. She touched it, and the glow pulsed softly, warm and insistent. Her pulse quickened. She had never seen such a mark before, never felt such power. A whisper of fear and exhilaration coiled in her chest. Something inside me has awakened, and no one, not even the king, will be able to ignore it for long. And for the first time in her life, Celine wondered if being invisible had been a mistake. The corridor seemed darker, colder, yet alive, humming with secrets she had only glimpsed from the shadows. Somewhere deep inside, the wolf spirits of the Black Fang stirred, sensing what she did not yet fully understand. Celine's life, once a slow, quiet shadow, had begun to shift. And the palace that had ignored her for so long might never forget her again. Welcome back to the channel, and for new viewers, don't forget to subscribe. Because this is only the beginning of Celine's journey, and you won't want to miss a single heartbeat of her destiny. Chapter 2. Whispers Before the Ritual. The glow of the rune under Celine's skin faded as quickly as it had appeared, leaving her hand trembling. She pressed her fingers against the marble wall for balance, listening to the distant echoes of the palace. The soft shuffle of servants, the low murmurs of warriors, and above all, the quiet hum of anticipation. The moonfall ritual was approaching, a night when the Alpha King and his wolves gathered beneath silvered skies to renew their bond with the moon goddess Nimra. Celine had only glimpsed the ritual once, from the shadows, but even that memory carried awe and fear. Tonight, she would witness it again, though she did not yet know her place in it would shift forever. As she moved quietly along the corridor, a sudden hush drew her attention. Two advisors, cloaked in midnight blue and silver embroidery, had paused near the grand doors of the council chamber. Their voices were soft but urgent. "Must ensure she never discovers her bloodline," one whispered. "Erasing the last descendant is critical. If she lives, everything we've built could collapse," the other hissed. Celine's breath caught. Her chest tightened. Last descendant? She had no family here, no one who remembered her name. Yet the words struck her like ice. She pressed herself against the wall, braid brushing against the cold stone, and listened as the conspiracy unfurled. Her mind raced. Why me? What did they mean? Why now? Meanwhile, somewhere deeper in the palace, Aldrich Thornvale sensed the disturbance before anyone could speak it aloud. He paused in the moonlit hall, nostrils flaring, his wolf stirring beneath his skin. Something dangerous was near, something hidden. Yet he could not locate it. He could only feel it, like a shadow crawling just out of reach. Celine, unaware of his proximity, wiped her hands on her apron and tried to steady her pounding heart. She had survived the palace's cruelty for years by being invisible, but now she realized invisibility might no longer protect her. The words she had overheard clung to her like a cold mist, pressing against her every thought. Before she could retreat to the solitude of the servants' quarters, a sharp summons arrived. Celine Vera, a court attendant called, voice clipped. You will prepare for the moonfall ritual. You are needed as a servant tonight. Celine's stomach sank. To attend the ritual was an honor for some, a position of power for others, but for her, it felt like stepping into the lion's den. Every whisper she had heard, every shadow she had felt, now pressed against her like invisible chains. Her hands shook as she gathered the modest ceremonial garb, a simple woven tunic, braided sash, and silver-threaded cuffs. As she dressed, she could not ignore the faint pull of her rune beneath her skin. It pulsed softly, warm and insistent, as though aware that the coming night would change everything. And so, with heart pounding, Celine followed the attendants through the palace's mist-filled corridors, knowing she was stepping into a world that had always ignored her, yet might never allow her to return to the shadows again. Celine would not simply serve the ritual. She was about to become part of a destiny she had never asked for, and the palace would be forced to notice her at last. Chapter 3. The Moonfall Turns Black. Celine followed the attendants into the great ceremonial hall, her heart thudding like a drum beneath her ribs. The hall shimmered under the pale glow of moonlight filtering through high-arched windows. Mist curled along the polished marble floors, silver sparks drifting in the air as the moonfall ritual began. Wolves padded silently around the hall, their eyes glinting with loyalty and anticipation. The runic flames carved into the ceremonial floor were lit, first gold, then silver, casting a gentle glow on the gathered warriors and advisors. Celine kept her head bowed, hands folded, her body trembling, not from fear alone, but from a strange pulsing warmth beneath her skin. The rune glowed faintly under her arm, as though it sensed the power in the hall waiting to be awakened. The ritual began smoothly. Chants echoed, soft and melodic, voices blending like wine through the silver forests. Wolves circled, their breaths misting in the moonlight. And then, without warning, the flames shifted. Gold became silver, and silver became black. A chill rippled through the hall. Wolves whimpered and stumbled, their graceful bodies collapsed as if invisible chains weighed them down. Advisors screamed, trying to regain control, their voices trembling with panic. The magic that had held the palace together for centuries began to fracture, sparks scattering like falling stars across the floor. Celine felt the pulse under her skin surge. Warmth spread from her chest outward, illuminating her entire body with an unearthly glow. It was soft, silver and fierce all at once. Ancient power she had never known she possessed, power that belonged to no one but her. She lifted her eyes, and for the first time, the entire hall truly saw her. Aldrich Thornvale stood frozen, his wolf instincts roaring inside him. His alpha presence faltered, heart racing. The wolf that had always obeyed him instinctively now bowed its head to Celine, reverence and instinct merging into something dangerous and undeniable. The Alpha King, feared and untouchable, felt a pull he could not resist, a trembling in his chest he had never experienced. The chaos around them escalated. Warriors scrambled, advisors shouted, and the High Priestess Elora Duskvale raised her hands, trying to stabilize the magic, but even her power faltered in the presence of Celine's awakening. And yet, despite the panic, Celine felt calm. The power flowing through her was not violent. It was right. But the palace could not understand this. Fear ignited where awe should have bloomed. She is dangerous, one advisor hissed, pointing at the glowing girl. Her power cannot be contained. She must be restrained. Whispers of betrayal and terror rippled through the hall. Guards began to approach, weapons raised, but the wolves that had once followed Aldrich's command now hesitated, their gaze fixed on Celine as though she were the axis of their world. Celine's pulse raced, not from fear, but from the thrill and terror of being seen. She was no longer invisible. She was no longer a maid. She was power incarnate, and the palace had just realized it. And Aldrich. Aldrich felt something inside him fracture. His control, his authority, his carefully constructed composure, all slipping as the wolf within him bowed in silent devotion to a girl he had only ever thought of as a shadow. The palace branded Selene a threat. They whispered of exile, of destruction, of a power too dangerous to exist. And Selene realized, with a shiver of both fear and excitement, that nothing in her life would ever be the same again. Chapter 4. The King Who Loses Control. The aftermath of the ritual left the grand hall in disarray. Burnt-out runes smoked faintly on the marble, warriors murmured in fear, and advisors scurried like shadows, whispering warnings and threats. Yet amid the chaos, Selene stood tall, her silver glow now fading but leaving a lingering warmth beneath her skin. She was exhilarated and terrified. Aldrich Thornvale emerged from the shadows, his presence commanding and heavy, yet internally he was unraveling. His wolf, the primal part of him that had always obeyed without question, whined softly, pressing against his mind, urging him forward. But Aldrich fought. "I am the Alpha. I do not bow. I do not submit." Yet every instinct in his body rebelled. Every instinct whispered that this girl, this soft, glowing, defiant maid, was not merely a threat. She was his. Something ancient and undeniable pulled him toward her, a magnetic force that shook the foundation of his control. Selene's eyes met his, wide and unguarded. Fear, confusion, and a spark of fury burned in them. "Why are you looking at me like that?" she demanded, her voice trembling yet strong. Do you want me dead?" "No," he said, low and rough, his chest rising and falling with suppressed tension. I am keeping you safe. From them. From yourself. From everything." Selene's brows knitted. "Safe? You call locking me away safe?" Aldrich's jaw tightened. "I cannot." He paused, his wolf whispering, urging, clawing at the edges of his restraint. His hands clenched into fists. "I cannot let you out of my sight. Not while this power grows." Selene's heart hammered. "You're afraid," she whispered, voice sharp with both anger and hurt. "Not for me. For yourself." Aldrich froze, the accusation hitting a nerve he could not deny. He wanted to resist her, to maintain his iron control over himself and the Black Fang Dominion, but every fiber of his being resisted. The wolf inside him howled, a low guttural vibration that only he could hear. Yet it carried a word, forbidden, primal, and irreversible. "Mate." The word hung in the air, heavy and impossible, though no one else seemed to hear it. Selene's breath caught. She stumbled back, instinctively reaching for her glowing rune, feeling its pulse quicken. She could not speak, could barely comprehend the declaration. "Mate. Him. How? Why?" Aldrich's eyes were wild, torn between desire and command, instinct and reason. He pressed his hands against the marble walls, as if trying to hold himself together. His wolf pressed against him, insistent and primal, declaring what his mind could not yet accept. Selene's fury ignited. "You can't just decide that," she said, stepping forward despite trembling knees. "I am not yours to claim." But Aldrich only shook his head, dark hair falling into his eyes, lips parted as he fought to regain control. "You do not understand. It is not my choice," he growled, voice heavy with both warning and longing. It is the bond. It is the truth that has been written in our blood. And my wolf, myself, knows it." The corridor seemed to narrow around them, silver mist curling, glowing marks faintly flickering on Selene's skin as if responding to the intensity of the moment. For the first time, Selene realized that the palace walls, the servants, the warriors, they no longer defined her. Aldrich Thornvale, Alpha King of the Black Fang Dominion, had just seen her fully, and she was no longer invisible. Aldrich's wolf had spoken the forbidden word, binding them in a destiny neither fully understood, and Selene's life and heart was now entangled with the Alpha King's in ways that could not be undone. Chapter 5. The palace turns against her. The palace had shifted overnight. Where once Selene had moved unnoticed, whispers followed her like shadows. Every step echoed against cold marble as the advisors convened in secret, their faces tight with fear and resolve. They had seen the glow of her rune, felt the tremor of her power, and now they demanded a solution. "She cannot remain here," one advisor hissed, voice quivering. "Her existence threatens the Dominion. Execution is the only safe course." "She is cursed," another murmured, wringing his hands. "The moon goddess never intended this. The Alpha King may be blind to it, but we are not. She is dangerous." Selene, carrying trays of ceremonial vessels, overheard the words as she passed. Her chest tightened with a mix of terror and fury. Dangerous? Curse? She had never asked for this, never sought to wield such power, yet they branded her a threat for merely existing. Aldrich appeared without warning, dark eyes flashing as he swept into the council chamber. His presence was commanding, his wolf a restless energy beneath his skin, growling low and warning those who dared challenge him. She is under my protection, he said, voice cutting through the murmurs like steel. Anyone who touches her will answer to me. The advisors froze, exchanging glances that mixed fear with thinly veiled anger. They were loyal to the Dominion, yes, but the Alpha King's sudden favoritism toward Amir made challenged centuries of tradition. She is dangerous, my lord, one dared. Do you not see? She is under my care, Aldrich interrupted, jaw tight. His wolf pressed closer, teeth bared in invisible tension. I will not let you harm her. Even as he spoke, warriors who had once ignored her presence now loomed, circling with sneers. Cursed maid, one spat. The flames themselves do not want you here. Better if you were gone. Celine's heart pounded. She tried to hold her head high, to meet Aldrich's gaze for reassurance, but fear prickled at her skin. She had survived the palace's cruelty for years by being unseen. Now, even the king's protection could not shield her entirely. Aldrich moved beside her, his hand brushing her arm, not in touch of gentle comfort, but in subtle dominance, a silent promise of safety and ownership. The touch was electric, and Celine shivered under it, torn between panic and an unfamiliar warmth. Then, without warning, a searing pain coursed through her veins. The rune under her skin flared, silver at first, then black, then silver again, pulsing in wild chaotic bursts. It spread across her shoulders, down her arms, and along her spine, illuminating the hall with ethereal light. Celine stumbled, clutching her chest as the power surged. Warriors recoiled, some bowing instinctively, others screaming in fear. The advisors froze, mouths agape, realizing the danger they had underestimated. Aldrich's eyes widened, wolf instincts bristling, as he took her into his arms just as she collapsed. Her body was trembling, overwhelmed by the sudden awakening of even more ancient runes beneath her skin. She could feel the power coursing through her, raw and alive, demanding recognition. Yet her mind spun in terror and confusion. She had not asked for this. She had only wanted to survive. Aldrich held her close, whispering her name, his voice low, steady, and urgent. His wolf howled silently in approval, pressing insistently against him. But the palace, her home of shadows and silence, had branded her a threat. And in that moment, Celine understood the cruel truth. She was no longer merely a maid. She was the power that everyone feared. Celine collapsed fully into Aldrich's arms as the newly awakened runes ignited across her body, signaling the next stage of her destiny, one that could no longer be ignored or contained. Chapter 6. The Buried Bloodline. Celine awoke in her chamber, the warmth of Aldrich's protection lingering in her memory but absent from the cold, stone walls around her. Her body ached from the surge of power that had overtaken her in the great hall, and her heart ached even more from the weight of fear and uncertainty. She felt exposed, fragile, yet her mind burned with questions she had no answers for. A soft knock at the door drew her attention. "Celine, it's me," Melissa's voice whispered through the cracks. Warm, familiar and comforting, yet heavy with the seriousness of what she carried. Melis entered quietly, closing the door behind her. Her eyes, usually playful and light, were shadowed with grief. She carried a small ancient scroll, the edges worn with age, its wax seal glinting faintly under the moonlight spilling through the window. "Celine, you need to see this," Melis said gently, setting the scroll on the table. "It's your family's history. What was done to them?" Celine hesitated, fingers trembling as they hovered above the parchment. She had always believed her family line had vanished, forgotten by time. But now, she sensed that the truth would hurt in ways deeper than any physical wound. Melissa's voice softened but trembled. "Your lineage. It was erased. Every record, every trace. Purged because your blood carried power the crown feared. Your family's strength was a threat, and the Dominion decided no one should survive to challenge it. Everyone you thought lost. They were destroyed to prevent the very power that flows in you now." Celine's knees buckled. She sank into the chair, clutching her arms to her chest as tears pricked at her eyes. Her mind spun with grief, confusion, and rage. I was never meant to survive. The weight of centuries-old fear and violence pressed down on her heart. I lived. For what? She whispered, voice cracking, trembling. Why was I spared if they wanted all of us gone? Melissa's eyes were heavy with sorrow. Because the enemy wants you alive. They need your power, your bloodline, to use against the king, against the Dominion. You were a tool from the moment you drew your first breath, Celine. Celine's chest tightened. Anger, despair, and betrayal collided within her. Every moment of being invisible, mocked, and underestimated, the humiliation, the silence, felt like a lie. She had been surviving, thinking herself alone, yet every step had been orchestrated by forces she could not even see. Tears streamed down her cheeks as her voice trembled, raw with anguish. I am nothing. I was never meant to exist. All my life. It was all a shadow, a lie. Melis knelt beside her, holding her hands with gentle strength. No. Celine. You exist. And that is why you are dangerous. Not to them, but to yourself and to the destiny they tried to erase. They could not destroy what is meant to shine. Celine closed her eyes, the weight of despair pressing against her chest like stone. Her body trembled not just from grief, but from the awakening of something deeper within, the power that had erupted in the hall during the ritual, now responding to the pain in her heart. The runes beneath her skin pulsed faintly, glowing silver, then black, as though echoing her suffering and resilience. From the shadows outside the window, a cold whisper brushed against the chamber, carried on the wind. We have kept her alive, for our plan, and soon she will serve its purpose. Celine flinched, realizing the enemy that had orchestrated her survival was no longer a distant threat. They were near, watching, waiting, and manipulating every thread of her life. The room felt smaller, colder, yet Melissa's hand remained steady in hers. Celine's heart wavered between despair and determination. She had survived this long. She would survive this revelation. And perhaps, just perhaps, she would not be a pawn forever. The enemy faction revealed itself, unseen but ever-present, confirming that Celine's survival had never been a gift. It had been a calculated step in a dangerous plan, and her destiny had only just begun. Chapter 7. The Enemy's Price. The Blackfang Dominion was restless. Word of Celine's awakening had spread like wildfire, carried on whispers and fearful rumors. Warriors cast furtive glances, advisors muttered in dark corners, and even the halls of the palace seemed to tremble with anticipation. Yet amid the unease, Aldrich Thornvale stood resolute, his dark gaze burning with an intensity no one dared challenge. A messenger arrived under a banner of black silk, bearing a message from the enemy faction Celine had only begun to understand. The parchment was stark, the words brutal and uncompromising. Hand her over or face ruin. Aldrich read the message, jaw tight, wolf instincts roaring beneath his skin. Every instinct demanded he obey, protect his people, maintain the Dominion's stability. And yet another deeper instinct, the one that belonged to him alone, urged a different path. No, he said aloud, voice low and commanding. I will not hand her over. Not to them. Not to anyone. The room fell silent, all eyes on him. Some advisors paled, others clenched fists. A few whispered that defiance could cost the kingdom everything. But Aldrich did not flinch. His wolf growled low in his chest, urging him forward, even as his heart pounded with a dangerous mixture of fear and desire. Celine watched him, feeling the tremors beneath his composure. She realized with a sudden piercing clarity that his control, so often absolute, was fraying, unraveling because of her. Not because she wanted him to stumble, but because her presence, her power, her very existence, touched something deep within him, something he could not resist. Her chest tightened at the realization. I am not just a pawn. I am him. Aldrich turned to her, dark eyes softening with a storm of unspoken emotion. Celine, stay close. No one will touch you, he murmured, voice low, carrying a weight of protective ferocity that made her shiver. I swear it. Yet even as he spoke, fear lingered in her chest. The enemy's power was formidable, their reach unseen. She could feel their gaze like icy fingers brushing the edges of her mind, testing her resolve. That night, unable to sleep, Celine wandered to the palace gardens. Moonlight bathed the silvered trees in soft luminescence, mist curling around her like a protective veil. She knelt beside a pool, gazing at her reflection, the glow of her rune faintly shimmering beneath her skin. A sudden warmth washed over her, a voice, soft and ethereal, carrying the weight of ancient power. Nimra, the moon goddess herself, appeared in the ripple of silver water, her form shifting like mist, eyes luminous and knowing. Celine Vera, Nimra's voice echoed, melodic and firm. Your path has been orchestrated since before your first breath. The choices made for you were never yours, yet your power is your own. The time has come to choose, not by fear or survival, but by destiny. Will you embrace it? Celine's heart raced. The weight of her lineage, the rage and grief of knowing her family was destroyed, and the pull of her bond with Aldrich swirled together. She felt small, yet impossibly large, as if the threads of her life had been woven into something eternal and unstoppable. The moonlight reflected off her rune, now shining brighter in response to the goddess's words. Celine understood the truth of the moment. She had a choice, to remain a pawn of fear, or to step into her destiny and claim the power she had always carried within herself. The vision faded, leaving Celine breathless and resolute. She knew now that her next step would define not only her own fate, but Aldrich's, the dominions, and the power that pulsed in her blood. Her destiny had chosen its moment, and she would answer. Chapter 8. When the Maid Becomes Power. The morning after the moonlit vision, Celine awoke with a new awareness coursing through her veins. The silver-black glow of her rune throbbed faintly beneath her skin, a reminder that her power was no longer a whisper, it was alive. Aldrich stood at the edge of the courtyard, tall, dark and commanding, yet soft in the morning light as he watched her approach. You slept well? He asked, voice low but gentle. His wolf stirred beneath his calm exterior, protective, attentive, restless. Celine shook her head, forcing a small smile. I didn't sleep. Not really. She flexed her fingers, feeling the warmth of the magic pulsing within her. But I want to learn. To control it. Aldrich's eyes darkened with both pride and caution. You must. Your power is growing faster than you know, and if you cannot master it, it will master you. He led her to a secluded glade in the palace gardens, mist curling softly around silver-leaved trees. The air was thick with magic, alive in the quiet hum of nature, responding to the pulse of Celine's heartbeat. Aldrich demonstrated simple control. A touch here, a glance there, guiding the energy that shimmered around them. Celine's hands glowed as she concentrated, the rune on her arm pulsating in tandem with her heart. Sparks of silver light danced along the edges of her fingers, illuminating the mist like tiny stars. Aldrich stepped closer, his presence grounding her, guiding her, yet every movement, every touch carried attention neither dared speak aloud. You're stronger than you realize, Aldrich murmured, hand hovering near hers without touching. Stronger? And yet more fragile than anyone I've ever known. Celine felt the warmth of his words seep into her, mingling with the thrill of newfound power and the sting of vulnerability. Her cheeks flushed as the proximity of the Alpha King pressed against her heart like an unspoken promise. Hours passed in this delicate dance. Power, control, tension, trust. Aldrich taught her to harness her energy, to channel it rather than resist it. With each success, each spark she mastered, the bond between them grew, subtle yet undeniable. Every glance lingered, every shared breath felt intimate, electric, and necessary. As the sun dipped low, casting long silver shadows across the glade, Celine's mind drifted. Images she had buried came crashing back. The night her family had been destroyed, their lives extinguished in a fire she had only glimpsed in dreams. Faces flashed before her eyes, and one stood out, the traitor, their eyes cold, calculating, the architect of her suffering. A shiver ran down her spine, and her rune flared, responding to both grief and rage. The magic pulsed violently, yet Aldrich's hand caught hers before it spiraled out of control. His eyes searched hers, grounding her once more. You cannot let it consume you, he said quietly, voice low, commanding yet tender. Not yet. Not until you are ready. Celine took a shaky breath, leaning into the reassurance, even as the memory of the traitor seared her heart. She knew now that mastery over her power was not just about control. It was about reclaiming herself from the shadows of her past. As her glowing rune pulsed beneath her skin, Celine remembered the night her family died, the traitor's face, burning into her memory, promising that the next steps of her journey would not only test her power but confront the enemy who had shaped her life from the shadows. Chapter 9. the wolf who knelt. Mist curled through the palace gardens like silver smoke, brushing against the trees and glowing runes etched into the marble pathways. Celine moved with deliberate grace, her hands radiating steady light as she tested her newfound control. The chaotic magic that had once erupted from her like wildfire now hummed in quiet harmony, responding to her breath, her heartbeat, her will. Aldrich Thornvale stood a short distance away, watching silently. His chest rose and fell with measured breaths, wolf instincts buzzing with alertness and reverence. Every movement of Celine, every flicker of glow from her skin, every pulse of energy, captured his attention, pulling at something deeper than duty, deeper than desire. Finally, he stepped forward. His boots sank slightly into the dew-laden grass. "Celine," he said, voice low, carrying a weight that made her pulse quicken. "I have watched you grow these past nights, and I see now the truth I have fought to deny. You are not just powerful. You are inevitable." Celine paused, heart thrumming, sensing the gravity of his words. His presence alone seemed to tether her magic, steadying the energy that shimmered along her arms and shoulders. Aldrich's eyes softened, shadows flickering across his face as he dropped to one knee before her. Mist curled around him, wolf instincts whispering reverence and submission that no human voice could express. "I kneel not as your alpha, not as the king, but as the one who recognizes the destiny within you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Your path is your own, but I am yours if you allow it." Celine's breath caught. The world seemed to shift around them, trees, mist, and moonlight bending to the quiet authority of their bond. Her hands glowed brighter, the runes stabilizing and radiating outward, touching the palace wards that had been weakening since her awakening. Where chaos had threatened to unravel the dominion, her controlled magic now seeped through every barrier, strengthening wards, restoring equilibrium. "Your strength. It is more than magic," Aldrich said softly, reaching out, hand hovering near hers, careful, respectful, electric. "It is courage. It is resilience. It is you." Celine felt warmth spread through her chest, a mixture of power and tenderness. She realized in that moment that she had not only learned to control her magic, but she had also begun to heal. Through trust, through acknowledgement, through the silent, steady bond with the Alpha King. For a heartbeat, the world felt safe, still, perfect in its fragile balance. But then a shadow moved at the edges of her vision. A chill ran down her spine. Her rune pulsed violently, warning her of a presence she had not anticipated. Aldrich's senses flared immediately, wolf instincts growling beneath his skin, muscles coiled, eyes scanning. But before either could act, the traitor, the one who had orchestrated her family's destruction, emerged from the shadows, cloak dark as midnight, eyes cold, calculated. Celine barely had time to register the danger before strong hands seized her, yanking her backward. A flash of movement, and she was pulled from the courtyard, screaming, the glow of her rune lighting the night like a flare of defiance. Aldrich lunged, wolf instincts and alpha strength flaring, but the traitor vanished into the mist before he could reach her. His roar of frustration echoed across the gardens, but it was too late. Celine was gone. Her hands flared one last time, glowing silver, before dimming as she was dragged into the unknown. The ward she had stabilized seemed to shiver in the aftermath, as though mourning her sudden absence. Celine had begun to master her power and heal her bond with Aldrich, yet the traitor had struck, kidnapping her and setting the stage for the final trials of trust, courage, and destiny that would test both their hearts. Chapter 10. The Broken King. The Black Fong Dominion trembled under a silence heavier than any storm. Aldrich Thornvale, Alpha King, once unshakable and resolute, paced the marble floors of his private chambers, fists clenched, teeth grinding. Rage, guilt, and desperation tangled in his chest like snarling wolves. Celine, the girl who had awakened the power he never expected, the one who had softened the hard edges of his heart, had been taken. He could still feel her presence in the halls, in the lingering glow of her runes, in the faint warmth of her laughter that haunted his mind. Yet now she was gone, ripped from his grasp by the traitor whose cruelty had first shaped her destiny. Raven Thornvale and Cale Dernhart entered without hesitation. Raven's eyes were sharp, calculating, yet softened by concern for his brother. Cale's usually cold demeanor was tinged with barely contained anger. "She's alive," Raven said firmly. "And we will get her back. But we need precision. The traitor's reach is long, and we cannot rush." Cale's hand rested on the hilt of his blade. We'll move the Dominion's forces tonight. The traitor underestimated the girl's bond with the king, and the king himself. Aldrich's jaw tightened, but his eyes, dark and stormy, reflected the fire building within. Then we move. And if anyone tries to harm her, they will answer to me. Selene struggled in captivity, bound by magical restraints that sapped her energy, yet her inner power continued to pulse, defiant. The traitor, confident and cruel, circled her, whispering promises of control and domination. You think your power is yours, little wolf? The traitor sneered. I created the circumstances of your life. Every hardship, every survival. It was for this moment. You belong to me. Selene's chest heaved with anger and sorrow. She refused to kneel, refused to be a pawn. Her rune flared bright silver, illuminating the dark chamber. The traitor recoiled slightly, eyes narrowing in disbelief. You cannot bind what is mine, Selene whispered, her voice trembling yet unwavering. I am not yours. I never was. As the words left her lips, the ancient runes beneath her skin erupted in radiant silver light, swirling across her arms and shoulders. They shimmered like threads of moonlight, coalescing into shapes, symbols, and arcs of energy that pulsed with her heartbeat. The magical restraints shattered with a sharp crack, sparks flying, and the traitor stumbled back. Even the traitor's eyes widened in terror. Power of this magnitude, raw and unrestrained, had not been anticipated. Selene's energy surged outward, silver and black light weaving together, a tapestry of ancestral strength and determination. Meanwhile, Aldrich led the Dominion forces to the edge of the enemy's fortress, heart hammering. His wolf instincts screamed, guiding him with an intensity he had never known. He could feel Selene, her fear, her anger, her power pulsing in rhythm with his own. When the gates opened, and the silver mist of battle mingled with the moonlight, Aldrich's roar cut across the chaos. Selene! He called, voice echoing with desperation and devotion. Back in the chamber, Selene's eyes widened as the door burst open, revealing Aldrich, Raven, and Kale. She felt an almost magnetic pull, and her runes flared brighter, aligning with his presence, stabilizing her power and her heart. The traitor, realizing defeat was imminent, hissed in rage. Selene, trembling but fierce, raised her hands. The energy surged outward, illuminating the chamber and shaking the very foundations of the fortress. The enemy faltered, their dark magic recoiling in the face of Selene's fully realized, ancient power. Selene had unlocked a power so immense and pure that even the enemy, who had orchestrated her suffering from the shadows, was terrified. And Aldrich, witnessing her strength and courage, felt a new wave of devotion, realizing that together they could face anything. Chapter 11. The Girl Who Was Never Meant to Live. The enemy's fortress was in chaos. Fires licked the stone walls, black smoke curling into the silver moonlight. Selene stood in the central chamber, her chest heaving, runes glowing along her arms and shoulders. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of the truth she had finally faced. Her lineage, erased from history, her family slaughtered to prevent the rise of their power, had never been a story of survival. It had been a story of survival against impossible odds. And yet here she stood. She had survived. She had grown. She had mastered what the enemy had sought to control. The traitor hissed from the shadows, eyes cold, teeth bared. You cannot escape destiny, little wolf. You were meant to serve, to bend, to die. Selene inhaled deeply. Silver and black light radiated from her runes, a reflection of every grief, every loss, every moment she had been forced into silence. No, she whispered, voice unwavering. I was meant to live. And I will decide my own destiny. The chamber trembled as a roar split the air. Aldrich Thornvale burst through the doorway, a blur of motion and fury. His dark hair flew behind him, his armor gleaming in the pale moonlight. He moved with the precision of a predator and the desperation of a man who had lost everything that mattered. Enemies fell before him like reeds in a storm. Wolf instincts roared through his veins, primal and untamed. Selene's eyes widened as she witnessed him, a man consumed with rage, yet somehow tethered to her in ways that transcended reason. His dark gaze met hers for a fleeting heartbeat, and something unspoken passed between them. Fear, trust, longing, and inevitability. The traitor lunged at Aldrich, dagger flashing. But Selene reacted instinctively. Channeling every ounce of her power, she thrust her hands forward, releasing a torrent of golden black magic that swept across the chamber. The energy hit Aldrich just as the dagger would have, encasing him in a protective shimmer and knocking the traitor back against the stone wall. Aldrich staggered, eyes wide in shock and awe. "Celine," he whispered, voice low, hoarse. "You." Before he could finish, the magic flared again. The runes on Celine's skin pulsed violently, wrapping around her and Aldrich in a luminous living web. She felt a pull in her chest, a tether forming that she had not intended, a bond deeper than instinct. Her heartbeat synced with his. Her soul shimmered alongside his. And in the sudden breathless moment, she realized what had happened. She had unintentionally bound her soul to Aldrich's. The air around them thrummed with energy, golden black light reflecting off every surface. The traitor froze, sensing the impossible bond, realizing that the girl they had sought to control had not only survived, but had forged a connection that could not be broken by any scheme or weapon. Aldrich, catching her gaze, saw the truth mirrored in her eyes. His rage softened, replaced by something fierce and intimate. "Celine, you are mine," he murmured, not as an order, but as recognition. "Not by force, not by destiny, but by this. By us." Celine swallowed, heart pounding in harmony with his. She did not resist. The bond was frightening, overwhelming, yet undeniably right. She had survived everything the world had tried to erase, and in this moment, she had claimed not only her power, but her place beside the man who had kneaded her fear and pain into strength. Celine had unintentionally bound her soul to Aldrich's, creating a bond that was both mystical and eternal, a tether neither enemy nor destiny could sever. The final stage of their journey, the true reunion and healing, was now inevitable. Chapter 12. The Maid Who Broke the King. The Black Fang Dominion shimmered beneath the moonlight, its wards restored, its magic humming once more with life. Silver mist wound through the streets and palace gardens, carrying the faint glow of the runes Celine had mastered. The fortress that had once been a prison for her now stood as a testament to her power, resilience, and the bond she had forged with Aldrich. Celine stood in the courtyard, her golden black runes pulsing softly, a quiet heartbeat of light and strength. Her chest rose and fell with measured breaths, yet her heart felt impossibly full. She was no longer the invisible maid who scrubbed blood from marble floors. She was Celine Vera, the last of a line erased from history, the heir of power long forgotten, and the one who had shattered the Alpha King's walls with nothing but courage and destiny. Aldrich emerged from the shadows, moving toward her with careful steps. His dark eyes were soft, intense, vulnerable, a contrast to the Alpha King she had first feared and admired from afar. "I was afraid," he whispered, voice low, almost breaking. "Not of losing you to power. Not because you were dangerous. But because you made me feel human. And I didn't know if I could survive feeling that and losing you." Celine's breath caught. His confession, raw and honest, was more intimate than any touch. She stepped closer, letting her fingers brush against his, feeling the warmth of his presence, the pull of their bound souls, the rhythm of two hearts entwined. "You don't have to fear that anymore," Celine murmured, voice gentle yet fierce. "We've survived everything together. And now, we decide our future. Together." Aldrich's hand rose to cup her cheek, thumb tracing the faint glow of her runes. His wolf, once restless and feral, now pressed close in quiet reverence, acknowledging the bond that had changed them both. "Together," he agreed, lips brushing against hers in a soft, deliberate promise. Celine lifted her chin, drawing in the power that surged through her veins, no longer chaotic, no longer uncertain. "I am Celine Vera," she declared, voice ringing with strength. "Heir of the forgotten line. Keeper of the ancient blood. And I will not be hidden, forgotten, or silenced ever again." Aldrich bowed his head slightly, lips grazing her forehead in a gesture of both reverence and devotion. "And I will follow you. Always," he vowed. Together they walked through the palace, their joined magic flowing into the wards, restoring every corner of the kingdom that had faltered under fear and secrecy. Trees shimmered under the moonlight, mist curled in silver arcs, and the very air thrummed with quiet, potent life. Mélisse, Raven, Kale, and even Elora Duskveil appeared along the way, watching in awe as the once-hidden maid transformed into a figure of power and grace. Fenric, the wolf spirit bound to Celine, howled softly, circling them, protective and celebratory. The final test of power and heart came not from enemies, but from the quiet understanding that the world had shifted. The Dominion no longer needed to fear the strength of one woman, it needed to witness it, to honor it. Celine turned to Aldrich, their runes glowing in perfect harmony, and smiled softly. "I was never meant to be a maid," she whispered, eyes bright with moonlight and certainty. "I was born to be the power that brings a king to his knees." Aldrich laughed softly, dark and relieved, wrapping her in a strong embrace. "And I am honored to kneel before you in every way that matters," he murmured against her hair. As the moon rose high over the Black Fang dominion, silver mist curling around their feet, the kingdom stood renewed. Magic thrummed in every corner, hearts healed, and love, deep and enduring, had claimed its rightful place. The invisible maid was gone. The woman who had endured centuries of shadows and cruelty had risen, not only to power, but to the heart of the man who had once been untouchable. Together they faced the future, no longer bound by fear, no longer hiding in shadows, but shining. Two souls intertwined, their love, magic, and courage a legacy that would echo through Lornardbound for generations to come. Celine had broken a king, not with rebellion or force, but with courage, power, and love. And in doing so, she discovered the truth. Her life had never been about survival. It had been about destiny, and the strength to claim it.